So growing up in children's church means you've heard the Adam and Eve story countless number of times. And as a child, I remember thinking, okay, we get it. Our foreparents are sinners. We are all sinners, we should stop eating fruit. And whatever the moral of that story was supposed to be. If only they taught new creation realities as much as they taught about the fall of man, maybe we'll raise better Christian children. But that's a discussion for another day. So let me put you through this story in case you're not familiar with it, which is almost impossible. So God creates the world, He then creates Adam and Eve, which are like the crowning glory of His creation. And then He puts them in this very beautiful garden, and then He tells them, go ye into the world and preach disciples of all nations. Oh no, that's the Great Commission. No, He tells them, be fruitful, multiply, subdue the earth, And then, He went on to tell them, you can eat of any fruit in this garden, but you cannot eat of this particular tree, which is the tree of knowledge. Yeah. Thank God I have the Bible here. He says you are free to eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. For when you eat from it, you will certainly die. Now, let me ask you a question. When you hear a story and the protagonist is told not to do something or touch something, what do you think is going to happen?
What does this button do?
Exactly. They are going to do that one thing in which they are not supposed to do. So that brings us to my first question. Do you think God was surprised? I mean, if you are not surprised by the outcome of this story, so why should God, who is Alpha and Omega, omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscience, King of all kings, everything, why should He be surprised by the outcome of the story? I mean, can you imagine an all-knowing God? He's like, oh my gosh.
Oh my God! Wow!
Or like a joke I heard from somebody, I can't remember who. It's like, oh my me. That's God saying, oh my God, in case you didn't get it. But He's like, oh my, wow, I cannot believe this happened. How come I didn't see this coming? Imagine God being that way. I don't think that's how things turned out, So that begs another question. If God knew that Adam and Eve were going to eat of this tree, and by so doing will usher us into all kinds of horrible consequences for humankind, why did He put the stupid tree there in the first place? I had thought about this question as a child, but I dare not ask Uncle Ben this question because I was going to be punished for asking a question like this. I dare you to ask your Sunday school teachers this question. I dare you to ask your pastors. I dare you to ask your spiritual leaders, because some people actually, let's not get into it. Let's not get into the fact that a lot of Christians do not really understand the things that they believe and the stories, the Bible stories that they've heard. They do not have full comprehension of it and all of these things. And as a result of that, they cannot, fully defend what it is that they believe in. Well, let's leave that for another day. I mean, this year was, it was a very, very eye-opening year for me. I had to, go through what they call, I had to reevaluate my Christianity, and learn and unlearn a lot of things, and just so that I could, fortify my beliefs. Yeah. So thinking about this, even as an adult, you realize that, instead of putting a tree there and telling them not to eat of this tree, why was the tree there in the first place if He knew that, it could birth such terrible consequences? The fact is that when you ask a lot of Christians this question, one of the popular answers that you're going to get is that it was a test, which I honestly think is a very, very silly answer. God put it there to test us. He wanted to see what we were made of. He wanted to see if we were obedient, if we were, cooperative, and That doesn't make any sense. This answer just shows how poorly, people perceive God. That perspective only portrays God as, the one who tempts us, knowing fully well that, we are going to fall into this, and then we're going to have to bear the consequences, and the whole of creation is going to suffer for it. What kind of God is that? It makes God look like a sadist, who takes pleasure in, causing people pain. And this kind of mindset is what makes people to put the blame of all the pains, all the death, all the suffering in the world on the shoulder of God. I mean, it's all His fault. He shouldn't have planted the stupid tree in the first place. Now, let's move on. I know that you've been taught that, there is nothing God cannot do. I mean, what God cannot do does not exist. I'm joking. But, the one thing God cannot do is lie. God cannot be untrue to himself. 2 Timothy 2:13 says, if we are faithless, he remains faithful, for he cannot disown himself. Basically, he cannot be something he's not. He cannot be untrue to himself. And what do we know about the nature of God? Well, the prevailing descriptor of, God's nature in the Bible is that he is loving. God is love. Scripture even further says God is love. He is love personified. That is what he is. And if you choose to believe this, like I do, then you will understand that every single thing God does cannot be at odds with his nature. Do you understand? Everything he does is done in love. Therefore, placing this tree in the Garden of Eden had to, somehow be an outworking of God's love. I mean, saying that he put it there as a test doesn't, it doesn't portray the love of God. That means there has to be another explanation for this. So what was the reason? Now, do not get me wrong. I do not know the mind of God. I mean, I have the mind of Christ. Well, I do not know the mind of God, but I know a few things about love. And one thing I know about love is that love cannot be coerced. Love cannot be forced. I mean, you cannot force a person to love you. I have never seen somebody at gunpoint say, oh, do you love me? Oh, you have to love me now. I'm going to shoot you. Pow, pow. Even though that person at that point says, oh yes, I love you, we all know that that is not true. That's coercion, and still that cannot, show the true position of a person's heart. The one thing that is required for love to truly be is the ability to choose it. Therefore, if God, was going to have a love relationship with us, he had to give us a choice. He had to give us the freedom to choose whether or not to love him back. I mean, anybody who has ever pursued love, you've ever toasted somebody, you've ever wanted love from a person, has to understand the reality of rejection. And I think that is the risk of love. Have you ever considered the risk that God, took in creating human beings as autonomous beings and giving them the ability of freedom of choice? And yet, if God did not, give us free will, we are nothing but robots. We are like slaves. Instead, God created humans who he hopes will choose to love him instead of, being programmed to love him automatically. Still, this raises an important question. What good is the ability to choose if there is nothing to choose from? It's like telling somebody, oh, you can choose whatever way you want to go, but there is only one road. So I think for freedom of choice to exist, there has to be an alternative to choose from. So you cannot just say, oh, you have to choose if you want to serve me, as opposed to what? Like, what other choice do I have? So now we've come back to the tree. By placing the tree of the knowledge of good and evil in the garden, God gives humans a choice. The tree in the garden was not, a cruel test that God knew we will fail. No, I think that it was a symbol of human free will. As a matter of fact, I think this is a very beautiful story. God creates humans and gives them the ability to have free will. But I think that this also creates a dilemma for God. Now, let me try and explain. I did a video one time talking about, the movie Bruce Almighty, and something that happened in the movie was how apparently, God gave all his power to this man, to do whatever he wanted. And then at the end of the day, he tried to do everything possible. He gave himself promotion, did all this other selfish stuff. But the one thing he could not do was to get this person that he loved to love him back. And then at the end of the movie, he was asking God, how do you get someone, to love you back without messing with their free will? And then God was like, welcome to my world, something like that. Like I tried to explain, if you make somebody love you like you could, like putting at gunpoint, that kind of thing, that's not true love, that's not genuine love. And you yourself, you could tell that, okay, this person is just doing this thing because I made the person to do it. But if it was something that you didn't have to force out of this person and it just came naturally, that would be much more appreciated. Now, this is the part that blows my mind. If God knew that there is a possibility for human beings to choose the path of rejection, even before he placed the tree in the garden, it means that he knew the price that he will pay, to restore that fractured relationship before he even made the world. Let us sink in.
2,000 years later.
yet he still went ahead and made it all. John 15:13 says, greater love has no man than this, that he should lay down his life for his friend. Basically saying that the greatest love possible is that a man should die for his friend. Therefore, God knew that, you know, the rejection of him in Genesis was the gift that he needed to show us the greatest love possible. So basically, he already resolved that he was going to die for us, even before we ever lived. I mean, before he put the tree in the garden, before Adam and Eve, before Noah, before Moses, and the rest of it, God already knew that he was going to die for us. He had already resolved to die. And I don't know, call me a hopeless romantic, call me, you know, whatever, but I just think that this is a very, very beautiful love story, and I choose to believe this, you know, this version of the story. It just makes more sense to me. And it makes more sense, you know, when we hear that, when we hear Jesus Christ described as the lamb that was slain even before the foundations of earth. It is just so beautiful. So the next time that you think, oh, why did God put the stupid tree, you know, in the Garden of Eden, you realize that the tree is not stupid anyway. Whenever you think of the tree, think of love. Think of the tree as a symbol of love. Think of, you know, think of this. I think this makes so much sense, and I think it even explains salvation even better. Now that, you know, God has come in form of Jesus Christ to die for us, he still made that choice available. I mean, all you have to do is believe. He gave us a choice. All you have to do, this is my love. I've shown you how much I love you. Now it's your turn to love me back. So all you have to do is believe that, you know, Jesus Christ is Lord, and the rest of it, and then you can now enter into this relationship with God. That's just it. It is so easy. And every time you see God makes a choice, he's kind of biased in presenting his choices. So Deuteronomy 30:19 says, I have set before you life and death, blessings and curse. And then God goes on to say, therefore choose life so you and your descendants may live. So whenever he gave us that choice, the same way he told Adam and Eve, do not eat of this tree. I put this tree there, but do not eat of it. The same way he gave people options like, oh, this is what you have. It's either you do this or you do that. Well, I think you should do this one. And the same way he shows us the greatest love possible. And then now all he says is, love me back, please. Just love me back. Just love me back. That's all he's asking for, because God has done the most. So it's your turn to do your part. Thank you so much for watching. Like, share, subscribe. Let me know what you think about this story. If you have a different opinion, if you have something different to say, just let's talk in the comment section. Yeah, and see you next time on this channel. If you want me to do more of this kind of videos where I retell famous Bible stories and give you light or like different insight to it, then let me know.